Well, everyone, welcome to our panel, Innovative Strategies for Teaching Russian, Idioms, Complex Topics, and Total Physical Response. So we will begin to get today with our middle group, Strategies to Teach Complex Topics and Ideas to Intermediate Russian Learners. So welcome, Iya Price, Svetlana Ross, Carrie Hoke, Hoke, Ili Hoke,
Hoke, uh-huh.
Amanda Wegner, and Albina Price, and Irina Mozuliova. The floor is yours.
We have a pretty large team, as you can see. It is a year-long program, so we need a lot of people to help us, right? Today we have three of us here. That's myself, Amanda Wegner, Dr. Ia Price, and Svetlana Ross. And our topic is, as we've already you've heard, is strategies to teach complex topics and ideas to intermediate Russian learners. So typically, based on ACTFL recommendations and other proficiency-oriented approaches, they recommend using everyday topics or topics that will be immediately useful, for example, if they're dropped into the country they want that speaks that language, right? However, on occasion, we are required to teach topics that maybe aren't ideal for the group that we're teaching. So in our case, we had the wonderful opportunity of receiving a federal grant from the NSA, which is called StarTalk. And I have this quote from their site here. One of the goals of the StarTalk program is to enhance workforce development in the federal government to meet national security needs through the study of critical languages. To that end, our curriculum needed to include certain topics to meet the sponsor requirements, right? Some of these topics were, for example, sanctions, political systems, cybersecurity, freedom of speech, and more, which are typically not what you want to give to an intermediate student, right? But in the context of this program, that's what we needed to do. And our team will discuss how we were able to combine different strategies together to adapt materials to allow us to give the same sort of comprehension experience, so to speak, to learners across different proficiency levels. And our program was called Path to Careers in U.S.-Russia Diplomacy. And my colleagues will tell you a little bit more about our program, about our students, and about some of the approaches that we used.
Hello, everyone. I'd like to tell you more about our program. So after students applied to the program, we interviewed the applicants and 30 students were selected to participate. And the program was called a year-long program, and it started in spring of 2024. And then we had immersion 2-week camp in the summer of 2024, in the month of July. And then we finished in December of 2024. So there were 3 major parts. So you can see the picture of our students. And there were several guest speakers that came to our camp. This is the picture from the immersion time when we had in July. So as I stated earlier, we had 30 students. We interviewed the applicants, and they were only 30 of them were selected to participate. And we created 3 groups based on that oral proficiency interview that we conducted before, while the selection process was going on. And then what happened is that the students in group A, well, since we were trying to see which kind of students would go which way, so the first group A, they were really at low-level Russian language learners. And we thought, well, we'll give a chance, since we would like to give lots of people the opportunity if they'd like to commit to our program. And that's the challenge that we had, to get enough number of students that would be able to participate with the topic that we were going to teach. So as I stated, out of the 30 students, about 10 or 11 of them were identified as novice, low to mid-level Russian level students. Group B were at intermediate low and or mid level of Russian. And Group C, composed mainly of heritage learners, were at intermediate mid and high level of Russian. So, and you can see the target proficiency was, for the most part, the lower levels level students we were targeting at intermediate, mid, and high, which I know is very ambitious, and we thought so at the time. But we were surprised that how well they did. And also the heritage learners, we wanted them to achieve advanced low proficiency. Our underlying belief is that to use language effectively, learners must develop grammatical, strategic discourse, and sociolinguistic competencies. And therefore, our program was based on the communicative approach, where learners play a more active role, active use of language was emphasized, and the students fulfilled social functions through language on a daily basis, especially during the immersion part. And therefore, we utilize several strategies throughout the whole time the students were with us. We broke down complex ideas, usually 1 to 2 main points per lesson. We created just digestible and cohesive units. Usually, it would take, we designed 3 to 4 lessons per unit. And then the students were able to relate to their personal experience. And then we also utilized a combination of closed and open-ended questions, and also implemented student-centered project-based tasks, which they absolutely loved, and that helped to promote the exchange of ideas and encourage students to work towards a specific goal, such as presentations and debates. And this is probably our main slide, just to kind of give you a practical idea or something that you can actually use in your own classroom. For example, as I've stated before, we had quite a few learners who were at the low level, especially in the very beginning of our program. And we thought how we were going to teach them the topic that we agreed to focus on. Usually, in the perfect world, if we had level appropriate students in our classroom, we would use open-ended questions aimed at encouraging level appropriate production, such as oral and written. In our case, for the lower level students, we tried to provide a lot of scaffolding with semi-closed questions using templates, matching exercises via Kahoot, for example, which they absolutely loved. And specific vocabulary sets. Also, you can see that for typical perfect world classroom, you would use longer authentic text and videos. Usually for the typical students, we would offer longer authentic text and videos. What we tried to shorten authentic text, was still used, and we always tried to find the short clips, short text, and we tried to adapt vocabulary. So it took a lot more time, but it was a lot more productive, and the kids actually felt that they could do it and participate fully. Also, for the typical group, we would probably use longer tasks, but so for the lower level students, we try to make, again, use shorter and clearer tasks. And again, for the typical group, text and lectures would be used. What we did, we tried to use more images, vocabulary sets, infographics, instead of the long, lengthy texts. Also, what we also tried, which they absolutely, what we believe worked the best, even though for the typical group, partner group work would be used, what we tried, we mixed we used mixed level partner group work where higher level Russian learners were able to assist or even actively engage in a conversation or in a task with lower level students. And at the same time, when there were points at stake, everybody was eager to participate. So, and also one last thing, what we did, if typical level appropriate students would be assigned roles in group tasks, what we did, well, the students would assign to themselves. What we did, we tried to provide scaffolding where the instructor would be assigning level appropriate roles in the group task so everyone could participate. So that's what we used. And here you can see different examples of our strategies that we used. Thank you.
On jest problema polityka. Что вы имеете в виду?
Можно мне? Мне возмущает, что Honey West любит птиц.
А как вы знаете это?
Я читала его интервью.
Это полностью ерунда. Это ложные новости. Вообще-то я верю, что вы иностранные агенты. Молодцы, развивайте.
России. И сегодня у нас специальный гость с уникальной историей. Наш новый помощник, известный блогер Александр Петров. Он путешествовал в Техасе, и здесь его материал.
В Иране санкции сократили доступ к нефту. То есть это лучше, чем использовать это лучше использовать санкции, чем оружие и войски. Да.
So as we told you before that we had a challenge because we ended up having one group that was a lower level that not suitable, I guess, for those types of topics. But as you saw right now in some of the videos, we tried to show you that mixed group approach where the lower level students are very engaged in all the activities and they're able to communicate, maybe not perfectly, but still they were reaching the goals of whatever they were trying to do. And again, the starting proficiency level for group A or for all of these groups was based on the oral interview that we conducted at the beginning. And then at the end of the program, we also did a proficiency testing. If you can switch to the next slide. It's just to show you that overall levels of our students at the end of the summer, and then we did another test at the end of the fall. But this is kind of to show you that yes, they have improved dramatically, even though this is across all three groups, which might not be indicating a lot. But importantly, if you can go to the next slide, yeah, talking about our group A, the one that was the main kind of like challenge and the point of this presentation to show that even such complex topics that we did, they didn't go just fly over their head with the strategies that we used, because they did start with very low novice levels. And at the end of our program, 9 of 11 achieved intermediate mid-level and received, for example, functional global seal of biliteracy, which is a huge achievement if you think about it. But more than that, again, we can't just say that, okay, this was the only Russian language exposure they got was through our program. Of course, they probably took their own language classes and things like that. But to indicate that our strategies were helpful is the feedback that we received from the students. So as you can see, this was at the end of the pre-program portion where the topics were quite difficult, such as education, criminal justice, history of government, and things like that. And students indicated that the assignments were helpful to my learning. So majority of them said that it was helpful. So they were engaged, they participated. And that kind of what is important. And then this is, again, student feedback at the end of the summer. And importantly, the graph on the left, activities were interesting. So there are a lot of students agree with that. So that there was no indication that students were unhappy with like the topics or like it was too difficult or they couldn't understand anything. There was nothing like that because of the way we were able to break things down and make it manageable for the lower level students. And again, this is just another slide feedback at the end of the program for after the fall session. And again, the topics were very difficult, such as cybersecurity, careers in languages and machine translation and technology and things like that. So again, showing overall satisfaction and students were actually learning. And so again, to wrap it up, just kind of wanted to encourage you that a lot of times as Russian teachers or teachers in general, language teachers in general, we get mixed levels in our classrooms, especially when we get to intermediate levels, right? So there are students who finish 4 semesters and they come to that intermediate class or, supposed to be intermediate, but they're not quite at the level. And it seems like they might the materials that we have, the textbook that was selected before we saw those students and things like that seems to be overwhelming and thinking, oh, there's no way that these students can deal with this material. But again, these types of strategies that we used might help you to accommodate those complex topics that appear in those upper level classes to students who are not quite at that level. And so that's kind of the conclusion. And if you have any questions, we're here to answer them. And feel free to email us as well if you need additional information. Thank you all.
Okay, let's open the floor up to questions.
I don't have any specific questions. Good afternoon, but I wanted to share that I had a couple students, or at least I think a couple, attending your program. I'm from McAllister College, so Anna Moan for sure. Charlie, I think, was probably at your program.
Yeah, I remember. I think we were emailing back and forth. Nice to see you, like in person, kind of.
Yes. Very nice to see you. It's also nice to hear how you ran the program and you did it. We're running the Star Talk grant this year, but we have a Trans-Siberian adventure. And we also have 30 students, some really similar challenges because we also have really intermediate level that are like heritage speakers that are at a very high level. And then we have some students who are completely different, very, very similar. So thank you for the presentation. I'm not going to take any more of the time, but there was no one talking. So I thought I would
No, that's great. Thank you.
give to my students.
We
Thank you
love
so
both the
much.
students you mentioned, by the way. They were awesome.
Yes, they were. Thank you for sending them.
Hopefully you were able to notice Charlie in one of the videos.
I saw Anna also. Anna was sitting.
That's right, Mullen.
Yes, on the picture or something. So
That's right. You did a great job. They came with wonderful Russian. We were happy to have them. See, it's a small world.
Iya, Amanda, and Svetlana, I was just wondering, what's the feedback between the NSA and your program in Arlington? Do you give test results to NSA? Does NSA give you material or tasks for what to cover?
Yeah. So the grant that we were talking about, the 2024, I guess, cycle, we didn't really have a choice with the topic pretty much, and there was no choice for the level for higher ed. So there were other choices for like high schools and things, but for universities it was just intermediate level and year round, and it had to be career oriented. So we proposed that program, and we as language specialists were able to develop our own way of creating accountability. So like we built in our proficiency testing just to show our results. So it's just kind of in the proposal, we put whatever measures we're going to use for evaluation. And then obviously based on whatever we propose, the reviewers decide whether it's a good proposal or not, whether it's going to be funded or not. So yeah, they don't have any specific requirements how it needs to be evaluated, but the way we proposed it, they approved. So that's why we got the funding. Yeah.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm. But we do obviously present all these things and results and everything in our reports that also match the proposal. So we propose that, and then we show that we have done what we said we would do.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why the topic, it was very important, or that was the only way for us to do the program, is to keep the topic, right? So because that's what we proposed, so we have to keep the topic. We said we were going to talk about sanctions. Okay, now here we are. We have to talk about sanctions. And I think that's kind of what the situation we were in, and kind of showing that we had to figure out creatively ways to still make sure that our students are learning, even though the topics were quite difficult.
Mm-hmm.
Hope this answers your question.
Thank you very much. Does anyone have any other questions? Well,
thank you all very much for coming to our presentation. Thank you, everybody.
Feel free as well, audience members, as our section goes forward, to type in the chat at any time. If a question comes to mind, we'll be monitoring the chat as well. All right, well, at the top of our section is Varvara Kurylova. However, I am not seeing her in our breakout room. I don't know if anyone has any news or updates about Varvara Kurylova. Her presentation is Idioms in Russian textbooks. And now I do have a presentation that I was saving for the end. And so maybe we'll send that text and see if maybe she's trying to get into the section, or if she's on her way, it's totally fine. If she's a couple minutes late, I can squeeze in and fill in the gap. Or I guess probably this is also how some of the dialogue between University of Texas, Arlington, and NSA has begun, because NSA is has a lot of a base in Texas. San Antonio, I believe. Yep.
Yeah. We are doing the same program, or like, the same topic, I guess, this year again. So this is our second cycle in this topic. We have different set of students that were not included in this presentation, but so it's our second time. And this time around, we were extremely popular, and we had so many applicants that we had kind of like wider choice. Like we were able to actually choose. Like the first time, we were like, okay, we have to, work out the 30 students in, but it's going well. The topic is still challenging for anyone who didn't grow up in the home with Russian language. If there are second language learners, the topics are still very challenging. So we're still working with that. So, all right.
Amanda, do we have an обратная связь?
Обратной связи нет.
All right.
Yeah, maybe Elena, maybe you can start, and then
I'll
I can email her in the meantime.
Yeah. My presentation 10 to 15 minutes long. So even if I go and present, we still have a lot of time afterwards, and we can circle back to Varvara. All right. Well, maybe it is appropriate that I begin. I think listening to your panel, your roundtable, it really seemed to me like there's some overlap, especially in how to engage students in some complex topics. Some of those complex topics that I'll focus on today in my presentation are verbs of motion. And so basically, my presentation, it spins off from an article which is under submission, and I do hope that it will be coming out. But it's based on some innovative teaching that that I really aspire to. Well, the pandemic, it really forced us to be even more creative in our teaching. And at the liberal arts college where I was teaching and still am during the main pandemic year, our administration gave faculty a choice to teach on Zoom or to teach outdoors, because studies show that in a well-ventilated area, such as outside, the COVID virus is less likely to spread. And this led me, I brought my language students outside, and this led me to rediscover TPR, the total physical response, which is a method, a groovy method of language teaching that was created by James Asher in the 1960s, whereby the instructor gives a command, "Estudiante idite," and then the students, they conjugate the verb and they do the action. "Я сейчас я иду," and then the students walk. And so I've always been interested in actually using motion to teach verbs of motion. And I taught outdoors during the main pandemic year, which allowed me to give students a space to be even more creative with their outdoor, with their movement and acquiring verbs of motion. And so today I'll just share a couple, I'll talk a little bit about the theory of not of TPR, but then how I realistically use TPR, and then a little bit about some of these outdoor activities. Okay, it's a practice that began in the 60s, but in fact TPR is still used today. A researcher, his name is Adnan Oflatz, uses TPR today when teaching German, and has done a lot of research as well, some recent research on TPR, total physical response. And he has found that, well, it certainly reduces anxiety in students. And so when they're relaxed, they learn more. And also, he did find that it's, and as James Asher himself found, is that there's like an accelerated pace of actually learning material. More can be learned, and then there's this great thing where material can also be retained, because it's in muscle memory. Now I don't use the strict form of TPR, but there are certain things from TPR that I borrow. This whole concept of mimicking the verbs while learning them, I certainly do borrow that. So let me go ahead and share my screen. We have this was the main pandemic year in August. And then we were even working in the tent in the snow here at the mountain in Tennessee. These are wedding tents, and they were decorated inside very well with some lovely lights. And you can see also how well air circulates in and out. I could bring a whiteboard in and have seats. So it's just basically a classroom, only way more ventilated. So the exercises that I'm going to show, and which I did in my tent, they do not replicate TPR's very, very, narrow, I would say, structure, command form, imperative, and then the student does it. But they do borrow from TPR the emphasis on mimicry and students mimicking the action of the verb as students use different conjugated following different pronouns and present and past tense. And mainly the main key here is movement. I support the idea that when learning is tied to movement, that which is learned is retained longer. And in the past, inside the classroom, I've always sort of had the inclination to include some mimicry. So with prefix verbs of motion, I'll ask a student to kind of, pop her head in the room, come in from the hallway. Что она делала? Она вошла. and then she steps into the room, sort of, performing and doing the action while students watch and while students are learning the conjugations as well. Good. Okay. And so inside the tent, there is also ample space to be giving students input as well. And it was really the process of like finally going outside that it was just sort of like a wake-up call, and I rediscovered TPR and total physical response. And I came up with new activities inspired by TPR because they encourage students to imitate the meaning of the verbs that they are learning. And I did do some testing afterwards and over the course of a couple of weeks. And then I have done it more recently. And I do find that students do retain verbs longer based on the research and the teaching that I did in the tents than in what I'm doing now back in the sedentary classroom. Okay, so one exercise is the fashion show. That we did in our tent. We started with input. We looked up words on gap.ru for specific vocabulary, such as rubashka в клетку, a plaid shirt, for instance, to supplement vocabulary that we were learning about clothing at the intermediate level. We were looking at the latter chapters of Troika as well. And the way that this activity worked in practice is that I assigned some students to be fashion designers and others to be models. So here's one of my models up top here. And no matter what role you're in, they were interviewed by Vogue Russia. So here, student designers, we have someone from Vogue Russia, and here we have a fashion designer. So the fashion designers were to answer verbally, orally, multiple sentence length questions given by Vogue, such as «Какую одежду носит ваши модели?» «Ваша одежда из весенней или осенней коллекции?» So after the catwalks, the student models who participated in the catwalks, they were also interviewed by Vogue Russia as well, answering such questions as «Что вы любите одевать, когда вы ходите на вечеринки?» And so students were prompted to answer these questions with precise terminology and as well verbs of motion as well. Where I go, to which event, what do I wear? The material of the outfits, the action of the catwalk, and the frame of a fashion spectacle in an outdoor tent gave students sources of visual and tactical support to reinforce the studied theme through this type of immersive experience. So we all know that it's very helpful to always give students visual support through photographs when they're learning. When they're learning, for instance, different ways of expressing things, заниматься йогой, and then give them pictures of people, doing yoga in interesting places that help students to understand and to make sense and to connect the words to the meaning of them. And then here in this circumstance, it was tactile, it was immersive, it involved movement. So it's taking that level of visual support, but sort of taking that element of visual support, but taking it to another level. And then after the catwalks, in addition, we went back to our tent to do some work, and I invited students to actually take part in a debate, so that during the Vogue interviews, students were speaking in multiple sentences, which they're supposed to do by the end of intermediate Russian. I also involved them in sharing opinion as well. And the prompt was, где вы покупаете одежду, в интернете или в реальном магазине? And then students, they broke up into two groups. And they shared opinions about why. So one group buys clothes on the internet, the other group buys clothes in brick and mortar in a real store. And this also prompted students to use verbs of motion as well, right? There's no time to drive far, so it's easier to buy clothes on the internet, and they could express opinion. And while some might argue, oh, debates, we should really save debates for advanced Russian, there's always a way, as we learned from the round table here, there's always a way to make something seemingly complex, to make it more accessible to intermediate or even beginning level. By giving them certain terms, это практично, это этично, я думаю, по-моему, and giving them a list of words as well. So it can be as basic and straightforward, or it can be rather elaborate as well. And then what's the power of debates in Russian language pedagogy is that debates are, what happens after a debate? You don't, it's a great form to give your own opinion, a way to give your own opinion, but to also summarize the opinion of someone in your class, which is also very good practice. And so I also find that, it's great whenever you can, if there's an appropriate time, to weave in a debate. And part of this was actually inspired in me from my experience teaching at Middlebury Institute of International Studies, where even at the beginning level, the idea is that you can always involve language learners who, might be at the beginning level, but they're still 18, 19, 20 years old. They're adults. They've already formed their opinions. When there's a unit about food, you can bring them, you can turn it into a discussion about farming, and sort of ethics of agriculture. Give students a list of vocabulary, and the more structure and support you give them, then they can do it. They can definitely discuss complex topics, and it's way more interesting, than really just keeping things very basic, pass the salt, and vocab quiz. We really, as language instructors, we want to hook students into the topic and have them continue with their Russian. And so if they feel already at the beginning and intermediate level that they are sharing their opinion and their true selves, and they're definitely going to to want to continue with their Russian language studies. So I have a little bit of information here about how I try to simplify or just provide more support and guidance and steps for how students should engage in a debate at the intermediate level. All right. Just to summarize, I find that movement from my teaching, I find that movement helps to ingrain new words learned into long-term memory. And as we all know, the key to good teaching is variety, and instructors can weave variety into their classes by using movement-based activities, as well as going outdoors. And here's an idea for how to take your students outdoors. And this is really, once they're outside, they're automatically in an environment where they are encouraged to move, So it's a great learning space for several topics, in particular verbs of motion. Thank you so much for your attention, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
I have a quick question. Well, first I want to say that Varvara is not going to be able to make it. She did answer us, so I guess we can do whatever you think is appropriate since I think you're the chair, I believe so. And then second, I wanted to say we really like the fashion show idea. It's so fun. And it really, I'm just trying to imagine myself when I was learning Russian, using those verbs of motion as I'm doing the action, I think would have been fantastic. So I can really see how applicable that would be, especially for such a tough subject. I'm curious, if you had, for example, an immersion camp, how would you adapt this assignment for a larger group?
So for instance, how many students do you have in mind?
For example, 30.
Yeah. And I guess one instructor?
We have like 5 of us, 6 of us.
Oh. Well, that sounds like Paris fashion show.
Ooh.
Because then each instructor could have students at the same level or different levels. It doesn't matter. Each instructor would have a group of 5 or 6 students. And so then each instructor would be supervising 5 or 6. And so, 1 or 2 could be interviewers from Vogue Russia. And then another 2 would be the models, because the models speak as well. Not every student can just be a model. You have to speak as a model. You get interviewed by Vogue Russia. And then 2 can be the designers who will be speaking about their inspiration. We'll be speaking about the ethics of material. We even do a unit on environmental topics, and then move to fashion, and do some reading about the ethics of the fashion industry. I think that would be great. And then there's a that's fantastic. Then there's a whole fashion show. And then one group, their models can walk, and then there'll be the questions asked about the inspiration for this clothing line. And then another group can walk, and there'll be a whole different. It'll be like one group is D&G, and the other is Dior, and the other is Chanel. I think that would be fantastic. Yeah.
I have a question.
Thank you so much. Some wonderful ideas. We'll maybe do something as like a warm up. That something similar, I think, would be really fun.
Yes, that's what I was wondering, and I would like to know more. Did you happen to provide some kind of scenarios for the students where they didn't have to spend much time on imagining things, that they just had to, kind of participate in a role play, or did they have to actually come up with a character and play it out? That's what I was just wondering about.
Yeah, my students here at my liberal arts college, they're very creative. So I knew that they would have a lot of fun with them. But I definitely gave them some prompts as well, some sample questions to ask. And then as I've been doing this, I did it with one group who, they were just, they're very creative. One is a really great actor. And so I knew they would do great with it. I asked them to record their fashion show, because I actually wanted to invite people to the fashion show, but since it was the pandemic, I don't know what happened that year. Everything was so weird. It's like I couldn't even invite people to an outdoor fashion show. Like, that's how weird the pandemic was. And so I asked them to video record their catwalk. I went and watched. And so then I saved those, and then I could give those recordings to the future class. So say that was in 2021, I have their recordings. And so teaching it in the future, 2022, I could have my next group watch the videos, and so they would see, okay, this is how that's done. And then always give students a time limit. The actual walking, 4 minutes. The interviewing from Vogue Russia, 5 minutes long. Vogue
Do you,
Russia interviews the models for 5 minutes. Vogue Russia interviews the designers for 5 minutes. Always give them a limit.
do you happen to have a lesson plan that we
Oh, I'll
could
give it.
borrow?
Yeah, I have it somewhere. Yeah, I'll make a
That
note.
would be great. Yeah, could you
Yeah,
please send
sure.
it to us?
Yeah, anyone, I'll send it to you, Svetlana, and then you can circulate it to your
Sure.
roundtable. If anyone
Yeah,
wants like a lesson plan of the fashion show, just type your name in the chat, and then I'll do a screenshot of it, and then later in the weekend I'll send it to you gladly,
perfect.
gladly.
Thank you
Yeah, it
so
was so
much.
much fun.
Appreciate
And
it.
I saw those outdoor tents and the lights. I was just like, okay, we have got to do a fashion show.
No, that's a great idea because usually we were thinking what to occupy our students with, during the idle hours. And I mean, watching a movie is one thing, but, not everybody would be interested. So that's why I thought, oh, that's a great idea, something, and it doesn't really require that much preparation necessarily. And I assume all levels could participate successfully at the same time. And yeah, if we could get kind of like what the scenarios that the students were exposed to, that would be great. Kind of like,
What I love is when there's a particular theme and then you open it up to all levels. So for instance, with sports, gra в бейсбол, заниматься йогой. This can be, that's at the elementary level. Then you take it to the intermediate and they're reading blogs, and then you take it to the advanced level and they're reading articles about that topic. What I've done in the past, for instance, at Middlebury in Monterey, is I had students do an oпрос, a poll. And so first year students would go and conduct a poll with intermediate students and with advanced students. And so the first year students would use the structures that they know to talk with one another in class, and then they go and they talk to intermediate, then they go and they talk to advanced Russian, and then they would create, a graph and then publish it in the program, the Russian program newspaper. So it's a way for first year students to be exposed to advanced, for advanced to help and mentor first year students as well. I mean, another neat project that I did recently is a challenge. And I'll send this along to you as well, because I'm always giving projects to students. So the challenge is for students to come up with their own project, be it memorizing a poem, writing subtitles to a Russian rap song, and then they create a poster and they explain their challenge. They give a little sample of it, the translation, for instance, or they sing if it's something they memorize. And then they explain what was difficult and then what advice they would give to somebody else. And then there are presentations. So advanced Russian, they gave their presentations about their challenge. And then intermediate students and novice level students, they got extra credit to go and hear advanced give their presentations about their challenge. And intermediate, they then gave their presentations about their challenge, and advanced and novice got extra credit to go and hear the presentations. So it's like the students are seeing what their peers are doing at different levels.
Oh, that's great. That's a great idea. Thank you so much for sharing. I appreciate it. Thank you.
That was a fun one too. You can do it inside.
I have a question. You also, on your slides, there were the word charades. Were you doing charades? Can you talk,
Yeah, so I do I do mimicking of movement, идти versus ходить, and I have somebody walk around for ходить, идти, go from A to B. And then I don't know, this has a lot of acting out as well. I don't know if you've this is it's called Linguapolis. It was developed by Vita Kogan. And it's a roll the dice game. You can order it online, linguapolis.ru. And so it's like Monopoly. The idea is that you land in Domodedovo and you have to get to the hotel in Moscow without going bankrupt. And so there's always a scenario to act out. There's a событие. These are all, one puts these on a table, and then there is the dice, and then you move your player, however is in the dice, however many steps are in the dice, and then you turn over a card, and then you have to enact the scenario on it. Ты забыл чемодан в аэропорту. Придется вернуться к началу. Okay, so that really can't be acted out that much. Let's see, but there are all these different scenarios that you act out with the person to the right of you. And so there's like an exchange of money and numbers. Тебе повезло. Ты получил бесплатную консультацию с фитнес-тренером. Расскажи, каким спортом и почему ты хочешь заниматься. So there's just different scenarios that you act out with the person next to you for an exchange of money. And so that can be a type of role playing. There were scholars, a few scholars earlier, who did something similar that was, this is something, a different topic that I guess would be more charades, where they even wrote about this in Siege, in that they were also inspired, this came out about 15 years ago in Siege. They were inspired by TPR as well, but didn't want to do something so narrow and strict like TPR. They wanted to do more mimicking of movements. And so it was actually a charades-like activity, and Irina, I can email this to you, where students would, for instance, draw an airport on the whiteboard and a car, and then mimic the movement of actually going to the airport. And then students sitting would have to say what the movement is using the correct verb of motion. Yeah, I'll email that to you. That was a very interesting article in Siege.
Susanna, hi. It's Betsy from St. Louis University.
Good to see you. How are you?
Hi, I was able to use Chekhov's play. Robert Louis Jackson has an article on the verbs of motion in Chekhov, and I was able to use that during the pandemic for students to read different parts. So it was online, obviously, because we're in the middle of the pandemic. But I just thought that I'd offer that there is an article written on it, and that at least it can be a good preparatory activity to something more active, like you're talking about.
Absolutely, absolutely. And it helps them so much to have a translation or a gloss.
Is it an article or is it a textbook? I think there was actually a book, right, with the text. Or is it an article?
This is an article. He's a Dostoevsky scholar, so I work on Dostoevsky. That's how I know it. He was at Yale, and he wrote one on the verbs of motion in Chekhov. And so you could have them read the article, and then you can have them read. I didn't have them read the article, but I drew on it when I was teaching. And they were reading parts. They got to choose parts from the play. And then I did a bit of lecturing on Chekhov and his background because, he has a museum in Moscow, so I had taken pictures of that. And like Susanna, I know a little bit about theater, not as much as she does, but when I've been in Moscow, I've studied theater a little bit there.
There's some
I thought it was a good low stakes, low stress introduction to verbs in motion.
And so students at St. Louis University, they memorize a scene or a few?
We read it, and then I also used it as an opportunity to help them with phonetics because we were online, and that was actually something that I was very worried about.
Oh, right. Yeah. Online, it's of course hard to do enacting a scene. Though it is an opportunity to introduce students to chitka, and the whole phenomenon in Russia of a chitka, that not every single dramatic production actually has to be memorized. It can be entertaining, and there can be a huge focus focus on the text and celebration of a text, just through chitka, just gathering together and reading aloud the play. Yeah. With the online, it was quite hard. I actually tried to during the I think it might have been 2021 to do dramatic work, and so that turned into a chitka as well. Yeah. Nice, good. Well, thanks for letting me know about that translation and the emphasis that it gives to verbs of motion. I'm usually, I often want to bring Chekhov into language study. His text can be strangely, direct and simple, and it can also be very complex at times. Well, thank you. Thank you so much, everyone, for questions about my presentation, about the roundtable presentation. I was really happy how these innovative approaches to teaching really jived well with one another. Yekaterina, I see you have a raised hand function.
Yeah, hi. I have a question. I'm sorry, I just have trouble with connection. You have, as I understood, the different level of class, am I right? So it's like sort of, it wasn't unified intermediate.
Oh, regarding the class that was doing the fashion show?
Yeah, TPR, regarding your,
Yes, I always have students in a spectrum who if you're going to assess them according to ACTFL, in that class, there were probably some at intermediate high, and then others probably at intermediate low, possibly
Yeah, okay.
when it comes to speaking, possibly at novice high.
Okay, the question is because since it is different level class, and I use TPR in my classes as well. So, but I teach like small children. The situation is since it's different level, you need to touch the grade of совершенный, несовершенный вид. That's like obvious. So since TPR, so how you manage to do that?
For verbs of motion or just for any verbs?
For whatever in the fit in your theme. So as I understood, there was
honestly, when I teach verbs of motion, I do not talk to students about совершенный and несовершенный вид. And actually what I'm doing right now is I'm teaching in a beginner's Russian class. And so I'm actually teaching them verbs of motion first before I get into the whole lesson about aspect. And so with verbs of motion, for me, it is unidirectional and multidirectional. That's how I teach verbs of motion. The concept of paiti, I describe that, not really as perfective, but the idea of embarking and setting out, going somewhere one way. So that's why, again, sort of the mimicking and having a student demonstrate walking around, creating a labyrinth of desks in the room and have the student walk around for describing, the difference between ходит and идти.
Okay.
Спасибо. And each as the infinite movement of each and идти. But then, yes, I mean so I mainly use TPR for verbs of motion because they can act out and demonstrate them.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much. Okay, great. Thank you, Elizabeth. I'm definitely going to look at that text. Great. All right. Someone else has put in the chat. Amanda put in the chat this link here to Linguapolis. I have seen that link before, and I do think that that will get to the game Linguapolis, designed by Vita Kogan. If you use it, set aside probably a week for students to play this. It's a game. It's based on Monopoly, so 1 50-minute class. By the time, and have them read the instructions for homework as well, so that they can come to class prepared and ready to work. But it's just a wonderful way to discuss verbs of motion, travel around Moscow, and there's a role-playing scenario basically at every card that is unturned.
Yes, I would like to say that I use Linguapolis as well, and I love it. I love this game. It always works with whatever level of students is. It's a great tool. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. You know, and sometimes we draw from theory and we apply it to what we're doing. Teaching at Middlebury Institute at Monterey, that's the house method there was content-based instruction. Обучение на основе содержания, I think это переводится. And so that was really something that originated in English, in teaching English as a foreign language. And then it was, after that, used more than by instructors teaching Spanish. So content-based, it really wasn't designed in the context of Russian. At Monterey, still it being the house method, you know, when I was teaching beginning Russian there, I was still expected to always in every class use content-based approach for teaching Russian. The director at the time, he is a specialist in teaching French and Spanish, right? But I mean, we can set aside 2 or 3 weeks just for students to master the alphabet. And so sometimes in the when teaching Slavic languages, when teaching Russian, we might be inspired by a theory from a different context, from ESL, and then we try to use it, and it might be a challenge because just, you know, Russian overall is such a challenge to teach. Well, it does turn out that TPR, James Asher, actually, when he was creating this method, he did studies in the 1960s of middle schoolers and high schoolers who were learning Russian specifically. And so this is actually a method that does organically grow out of teaching Russian as a second language, which I thought was very interesting.
This was so interesting.